today I am really excited to welcome Adapia Dorico to the show. Adapia is a good friend of mine. I've known her for a few years now, and we've been on a little bit of a journey together, both together and separately, as we explore this whole world of women's entrepreneurship and growth and expansion and all of these fun things. So I'm going to let Adapia tell you a little bit about what she's doing and what her journey's been, because I know you're going to find it as fascinating as I do. So Adapia, welcome to the show. And why don't you tell us where you are and how you got there?
Thank you, Karen. It's so good to see you again. I know we've touched base over the years at like you're saying, like different phases of the journey. And yeah, just as a brief introduction, I'm Adapia Dorico. I live in Los Angeles, or just outside of Los Angeles. I moved to the middle of nature during the pandemic, which was very healing. And professionally, I'm a strategic advisor, and I work really closely with fintech and real estate and private equity companies on their positioning and capital raising and investor relations. So professionally, also doing board work. Personally, I am, like you said, I'm on this journey. Like I'm at this point in my mid 40s too, that I've taken a different approach to the journey and really looking at integrating my personal journey with a professional one. And it all leads into one kind of singular focus, which is making more of an impact in everything that I do, being meaningful. So kind of dropping the ambition at all costs or the ideas of what we're supposed to be as a woman, as this, as that. And this is really integrating the best, probably say, masculine and feminine approaches. And that's why I'm on the podcast with you, because we talk about transcending all these different things all the time and all the phases that we go through, especially as women who want to stay in careers. And I'm just happy to be here and share.
Well, I'm so excited to have you. And your journey has been really inspiring to me personally, because I know one of the things that you've really tried to do, which you just touched on, is integrate the whole person. And it's something that in our world today that can be so hard to do, because everybody wants to label us and put us in boxes. And even before we started the recording for this show, we talked about, how you wanted to be introduced, and there are labels that I know you by, right? Or that I have known you by during that time period. But I love that you said those labels really don't fit anymore, because I'm doing different things. And it's so freeing, because so often we just identify ourselves only with this label. I am an author. I am an executive. I am a blah, 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 blah title at blah, blah, blah company, right? These are what we say we are, but it really isn't who we are. It's just a role we're playing.
Right. Yeah. Or it's like a skin that we have to wear for a while. And then when we get what we need out of that role or that skin, we get to shed it and like continue and put on a different costume or outfit, or, and it's like, I think if we approach it a little bit like that, like a change of clothes, it becomes easier to detach from it as an identity. And it's more of something that we can embody and learn lessons from in that moment in time.
Yes, 100%. And I love that. I love the idea of it. It's the clothes that we wear, because we change them, and they represent an aspect of ourselves, right? Just the way our clothing, depending on what outfit we're wearing, represents a different aspect of ourselves. Yeah. There's also it's not our true self. It's not who we really are. It's only one part of it. So as you've gone through this journey of self-discovery and integration of trying to put everything together, what do you think for you has been the easiest part of that?
Oh, the easiest, man, I wouldn't use that word at all for the journey. Okay. I think the easiest for me is talking to other people about it. And that's easiest for me after the initial hurdle of when I first started having awakening level experiences or like ego death experiences where I was so attached to the labels that I didn't like I thought I was falling apart when really I was just changing clothes. And after that kind of hurdle, right? Like
it makes you feel naked, right? It makes you feel naked. You're attached to these things, but I let go. Whatever.
Don't take my clothes. They're tattered. They're all wrecked. I'm like, no, don't take that little, like the last string. Because I think no. But like after that, I think talking about it, and the more that I spoke about it and the more that I could sit with the truth of it and communicate openly about it, the easier it became and the more natural. And I found that people would come into my life that could also speak about it, whether they were teachers or friends or colleagues or community. And that's been the easiest part for me, at least, is articulating it, or at least at the bare minimum, sharing it without shame.
Yeah. And so often we are ashamed of it. We feel like we have to hide it because, oh my gosh, I'm the only one having this experience. Or if I stop wearing these clothes, everybody's gonna know like what I look like underneath. And I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with that, right? The whole thing.
Yeah, or they'll recognize me, or they won't recognize me, and then I'll be left out of the tribe, and I won't fit in anymore, and I won't be let in. That was one of the first things that I experienced around what I might call that the first kind of like ego death truly around my professional role, and I really thought that I could only embody or be seen as this executive woman, and I could only continue up the ladder and the roles and the different things. And that was the hardest thing, was going through what was truly a spiritual awakening and being deathly afraid of telling anyone, because I didn't think that they would understand. And so the more I thought that, the less I talked about it and the more alone I felt. And that's what I meant about once I got over that piece, the sharing became easy. But that first hurdle was really challenging because it was so terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I really found about it, it's amazing how many women, and you talked when you were introducing yourself about your age, right, in your mid-40s. And the more women I talk to, that mid-40s to early 50s kind of range, I think so many of us go through that. And my husband used to call it, I would put on my sword and shield before I went to work, right? I put on this persona of what I thought, at least what I thought I needed to be in the corporate world. And I guess it is what I needed to be to some degree. But part of it was also putting on that protection and not letting anybody see how vulnerable I was underneath.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it too. Yeah, that's it too. I think that the vulnerability is not what we're taught in corporate or in the world at all. It's not what we're taught. And we find a way to get to that place on our own. Even though I think in the past few years, my experience has been in the past few years it's spoken about a lot more. And I like to say that there's strength in vulnerability. And I have that in my book. I wrote that book, Productive Intuition, in 2020. And like, that was one of the things, is like, there's deep strength in vulnerability, and it's reflected back to me. And when we can be strong in our vulnerability, we don't know who else is seeing that might need to see that role modeled and embodied. And they've been sitting on the sidelines thinking, I can't be myself or speak my whatever it is that's going on for them. But when they see us doing it, it's almost like permission for them to also share and be witnessed and heal and teach and go forward.
Yeah, no, 100%. And obviously, I think we have Brene Brown to thank for a lot of this, and all of her work on vulnerability. And I find that it's an interesting, I don't know, almost juxtaposition in talking to women, because we want to be vulnerable. We want to have these conversations, and we find people, like you and I have found each other. We find people that we can have these amazing conversations with, but yet there's still some of that perception that, oh, I have to be perfect. And that perception that I have to, that, this outer casing is really the most important thing. And other people aren't going to respect me, right? We feel like we're not going to be respected when we get into that. And that, I think, is the risk in it, right? We feel like, okay, if I share something that I'm truly vulnerable about, the risk is somebody else isn't going to respect me anymore, and it's going to change our relationship.
Yeah. And that might be the case.
And it might be the case.
It might be the case. Like, that's the thing is it could be true. And for some people, for some women, there's also real risk and danger in that. There's like in certain situations, that's a true and real risk. So it's not like we just like go up haphazardly and like share our deepest, darkest with everybody that we meet. But it's also finding maybe like in the baby steps and in the right places and in the right spaces, like who feels safe to share this with. And after a while, I do believe that we start to also, if those people leave, that's not a bad thing, because if they only like or respect or love us for the clothes we're wearing, to continue to use that metaphor or analogy, then, and they don't truly love, support, and honor us for who we are, then that's not an authentic relationship.
Yep.
And it's certainly not the type of relationship that I want to be in. In my 20s, I would never have uttered those words because it's different. But in my 40s, I'm like, no, I don't have time for this. And I don't have time. Life is both too long and too short for those types of relationships.
No, and that is a beautiful way of putting it. And we talk about, and I know this comes up in almost every conversation I have on this show, we talk about boundaries, right? And that's one of the boundaries. If you share something vulnerable with someone and they don't respect you for it, or it makes them uncomfortable, or whatever's going on for them, because let's face it, it's almost always what's going on for them, then maybe that relationship isn't serving you any longer, right? It doesn't mean that person is bad or evil or is whatever. And we often think that. We often think either I'm bad because somebody walked away from me, or the other person is bad because it's the only way we can justify not having a relationship with them anymore. But at the end of the day, a lot of times it's just, okay, our relationship has served its time and place, and now we're walking different paths and we can go different directions.
Yeah, exactly. And absolutely, it's like there's, I don't know the full expression, but I know it's something along the lines of like relationships are for a reason, a season, and there's a third thing that
a lifetime.
Okay, that's it. Okay, so that's the thing. And so, but we get really attached to the relationship. And what I think about too in all of this is the self-awareness that's required to know that my role in all of it and someone else's, because like you said, like if they're not the right person, maybe I'm not the right person. I mean, I was reflecting recently on there's a lot of work in maybe some of like the spiritual or the mindset stuff where it tells us other people have their hooks in us. And I thought, well, I probably have a lot of hooks in people, so why don't I just take care of my hooks and, clean up my yard and take my energetic hooks and thoughts and like random nasty thoughts that fly in my head sometimes for no reason. And just, why don't I clean up my side of the street instead of thinking, oh, somebody else has their hooks in me. And that was a lot more empowering and sovereign than thinking, oh, that person, someone else. It's so easy to place blame on something or someone outside of ourselves rather than just sit deeply with I'll call it like the ickiness that does exist in me sometimes, where I think, oh my gosh, like sometimes I catch those thoughts and I think, why is that thought there right now? Like, what purpose does it serve? And I have no idea. I don't have an answer for it, but I see it and I think, okay, well, I don't want you anymore. So how about we just like, I tell my mind, like, how about we like focus on something else?
Yeah.
Because that's taking me down an energetic rabbit hole that serves no purpose whatsoever and certainly doesn't make me feel good.
Yeah, no. And, I talk about my work with positive intelligence a lot. And that certainly is, one of the foundational pieces of that is taking responsibility for your own thoughts. But before we go down that rabbit hole, which I know we can go down that rabbit hole, I just want to go back to the relationship thing for a minute, because I think it's really important. And one of the things that I had a client I was talking to just last week about, and she said to me, well, I only think of that dynamic in romantic relationships. I've never thought about that dynamic in work relationships. And we were talking about something very specific. But at the same time, one of the things that really, an aha thing for me is we always think, okay, personal relationships are one thing and work relationships are something else, because work relationships were, I don't know, forced to have, they're forced on us, whatever. But at the same time, those relationships, whether they're personal relationships or work relationships, they're still relationships. They still have a lot of the same dynamics. And when we're, changing clothes, right? We wear different clothes in our different relationships because, we're more comfortable with our best friends, to show up in our pajamas in our bedroom. Just to really take this and then metaphor to an extreme. But and we have the people that we don't know well that we're only comfortable with, and we should only be comfortable showing up in our business suits, right? But then there's the people that we work with every day that don't really fit in either category, and the dynamics of those relationships, or that we work with on a regular basis, have more in common sometimes than with a personal relationship than they do with a business relationship.
Yeah, and I agree. I think there's a fine line with those two, because I think there could be a blurring of a friendship that's developed with a colleague, but also remembering that at like work, there are certain rules that still need to be upheld. And I think that's back to the boundary discussion, where you could develop deep friendship with somebody like over time for sure. But I think it's always better to err on the side of remembering that at like work does have some ground rules, and no matter how well you like know someone or want to act in a familiar way, especially at work, that does need to have boundaries and does need to be contained, because it's really easy to slip, and then it causes confusion in that relationship, which can then spill over into the business and have unintended consequences. And so I've seen it happen. I have clients, like consulting clients, where there's a deep understanding within the organization with people, but there still has to be a baseline boundary of the role. Like we do have to adhere to certain roles to maintain a progressive, like to maintain the progress of what maybe a company or a business is trying to achieve, or what you're trying to achieve professionally. And I think it's really easy for people to slip into over familiarity, and that can actually cost you if you are trying to get ahead, especially if it falls into, I don't know, like gossip or some of those types of things. That doesn't really help you get to where you need to go, especially with the organization.
Right. So I'm going to circle all the way back to the beginning part of this conversation and your journey to integrate the whole self, and ask you, when you play different roles in different organizations, depending on how you're supporting them in your consulting.
Yeah.
And even in those different roles, there's different boundaries and different guidelines for how far you can go and not go in that. But at the same time, I know for Adapia that showing up with integrity, with your whole self, with everything that you have to offer is really important to you. So when you're working in the confines of a role, it's a really big question. How do you still maintain that integrity of your whole self?
Oh, I I think it's because I'm anchored in the fact that I know who I am. And so I'm back to the self-awareness because I know who I am and there are my own boundaries that I've set for myself.
Yeah.
I've found a way to either not attract or not engage with clients who would not be good for me and where I would find myself in a compromising situation. So, for example, I had a potential client, had a couple of calls, and there was a reaction on one of the calls that really, it struck me, like I felt it in my body, and it was like warning, because the reaction was, it was very sexist and biased, and the person didn't realize it. It was just who they were. But in that one moment, for me, I said, this is a no, because I could already see that where this would go if I said yes, because that set the whole tone for what I would understand could happen. And I checked in with some people that I knew, that I respected, that knew, et cetera, and they confirmed this for me. And so despite the fact that I could have used that income at the time, I chose myself. And I chose myself also with the trust and the knowing that the right people will come if I continue to say no to the wrong ones.
Yes. And that is so critical, the ability to say no and to draw those boundaries to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And sometimes we feel like in getting ahead, we can't do that.
Yes. And I also say no a lot to my current existing clients. Like, I've learned to really embrace no with, not saying yes to everything. Yeah, that's a great, I'm not a yes woman. I'm not a yes woman. I'm going to tell you, it's my role to tell you, I don't think this is a good idea, or no, not now. We can do it later. And it's funny, the more I say no, because I know who I am and I know what's right for a client. And so if I sit in trusting that I'm good at what I do, which includes saying no to things because I know better, then there's a respect that gets created with the client, because they understand by my action that my integrity is in that thing that I'm saying right
there. It's really, I love that you are so willing to say no when you need to, because so many women don't. And, I've had other conversations with women that are successful. And I think that's one of the keys to really being successful is saying no and being willing, to go all the way back to another part of our conversation, to say no and have people walk away and being okay with that. It's just the same as we talked about with people being, walking away if you're too vulnerable with them and they're not comfortable or whatever that is. Having people walk away is okay. And being okay with that can be really hard.
Yeah. Because I think it touches on our sense of worthiness and worth. And to me, it's at the heart of that. And for me personally, worked with and continue to work a lot with scarcity in all its forms, right? And like, I can see how I can have a scarce mindset about a lot of different things. And that to me is a scarcity versus an abundance mindset also in relationships. Am I okay with letting that go? And do I know the story I'm telling myself about my worthiness and like my worth, and if people want to be with me or not be with me? And like the reality is if I really sit back and reflect deeply and objectively, there's an abundance of everything. There's an abundance of clients, there's an abundance of friends, they come and go. They also come and go. There are people that are no longer in my life, not because we had a falling out, but because we moved on. And I bet if I reached out to them, we'd have a fantastic conversation, and it might not make sense anymore because that was back in college and like when we were having like this great, semester abroad, and maybe it doesn't make sense. But the point being, like, if we remove the sense of what does this mean about me, then it becomes easier to let that thing go. And what does it mean if we say no to someone and remove the thought that says this means X about you? It doesn't mean anything about you. It means you said no, and their reaction is their reaction. And I learned this from my husband. He's really great at asking for things, even when he doesn't need to. And he'll say, I know, I just thought I'd ask. I never ask if I don't absolutely need it. Absolutely. If I ask, it's because it's really hard for me right now, and I'm going to ask you. And he just asked just because. And I had to learn he's such a good mirror. I had to learn that if I said no to him, it didn't mean anything. He would just say, okay. Like, I'm like, what do you mean? Okay. He's like, yeah, I didn't need you. I didn't really need your help. I just thought it was convenient. That to me is like, what? What do you mean it's convenient? But that's my issue with being overly independent.
But you're not alone. I mean, there's a lot of, I think women are trained that way. I mean, I think it's a perfect dichotomy. I mean, and I don't want to, I hate to do the pitting men and women against one another, because that's not at all what I'm about. But that shows one of the ways that we are socialized differently. I'm not sure we're naturally that way. I'm not even going to go there. But we're socialized differently. Guys will say, "Hey, can you help me? Can you help me out with stuff?" And to your point, they can do it.
Yep. And we're socialized to say yes, because we're socialized from a young age that if we say no, there's all these other consequences, and the consequences, what that means about you if you're not generous, if your women are supposed to be,
you're selfish. You're selfish.
Yeah, that's number. Yeah, selfish. So we come up against these dichotomies, and I think what's really beautiful in the workplace is that you can say no because that's part of business.
Yes, it is. Oh man, yep.
You have to say no to things. And it means nothing about you other than you made a decision. And I think if we learn, because it's not men, women, and it's the different energetics, if we want to call them that, like a masculine approach or feminine approach or an assertive versus a magnetic, whatever you want to call it. It's that if we can embrace that we have all of these in ourselves and we can play with them as tools, as accessories, to stay in our analogy. Like if we can think about it like that, let me try that for a minute. Let me try saying no. Let me try it with people that I think are safe. Let me advance notice somebody that, hey, I'm practicing this. You can do it in all kinds of different ways and try it on. And
like accessory, I love it. You can try in a scarf and then, I'm going to take it off and put it on another time, or try a color one, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And it's so empowering to know that we have choice.
Yes. 100%. So I know you and I could sit here and talk for hours because we've done that before, but we don't want to keep the listeners tied up too long. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation, listeners. I know Adapia and I have. It's been awesome. So if you want to talk more with Adapia or learn more about what she could do for you or your organization, Adapia, tell them how to get in touch with you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was like, I always enjoy the conversation. I thought you were talking to me. Sorry, everyone. No, she was talking to you. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm Adapia Dorico. You can look me up online. I have a website and then also on LinkedIn.
Yeah, which I think is how we connected on LinkedIn. So I'm Karen Ann Bulluck. Thank you so much for joining me today, Adapia. And listeners, we really appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully you got some valuable insight from Adapia about saying no, and more importantly, about your roles as changing clothes. I think that is a metaphor that we all can use and learn from. So I really appreciate you sharing that today. If you want to reach out to me and get in touch with me, you can also find me, Karen Ann Bulluck, on LinkedIn. I have a website, daringtotranscend.com, and I would love to have a conversation with you about what clothes of yours you need to change.